You never really know when your life is about to change. You might think you do. You might plan for it, save for it, dream about it, and even pray for it. But more often than not, life doesn't knock politely and wait to be let in. Sometimes it just slides a small envelope across the table, and inside that envelope is the key to everything. That's how it happened for me. One invitation. One simple moment that looked so ordinary I almost ignored it. But I didn't. And that decision, that split-second yes, unraveled everything I thought I knew and gave me back pieces of myself I hadn't even realized were missing. It started on a Wednesday, in the middle of a month I can't even remember anymore. I was tired. Not just physically tired, but the kind of tired that lingers in your chest and follows you home. I was stuck in a routine: work, sleep, eat, repeat. My dreams had slowly become silent passengers. I hadn't heard from them in a long time. I was existing, not living. And when people asked how I was, I smiled and said, "Good, because that's what you do." Because tired of being invisible to myself isn't something you say in casual conversation. Then the invitation came. It wasn't even addressed in a fancy envelope. It was just a message. A simple text from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. We weren't particularly close, just acquaintances who had drifted apart like leaves in a stream. I almost didn't open it. I almost deleted it thinking it was another group message or forwarded joke. But something in me paused. Something in me needed something new, even if I didn't know what that something was. The message read, "Hey, I know it's last minute, but I'm hosting a small get-together this Friday. Just a few people, nothing fancy. You should come. It's been too long." I stared at it. A get-together. Just a few people. Nothing fancy. I could already feel my anxiety rising. I wasn't good at small talk anymore. I wasn't good at showing up, at pretending to be okay in rooms full of laughter. But something in me whispered, "Go." It wasn't loud. It wasn't convincing. But it was there. So I said yes. Friday came and I almost bailed. I stood in front of my closet for what felt like hours, staring at clothes that didn't feel like me anymore. I had changed so much over the years, lost myself in so many small ways that it felt impossible to pick something that represented who I was. Because I didn't really know who that was anymore. But I went. I showed up. And that decision alone felt like a rebellion. Like I was cracking open the door to a world I had forgotten was waiting for me. When I arrived, I almost turned back. I saw people laughing through the window, standing in circles, drinks in their hands, voices floating in the air like music. I didn't know if I belonged. I didn't know if I'd be able to fake the smile long enough to make it through the night. But someone opened the door before I could escape, and suddenly I was inside. And then I saw him. I hadn't known he would be there. I hadn't expected to see someone who would look at me like they saw through the exhaustion, through the silence, through the invisible wall I had spent years building. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by people, talking about something that made everyone laugh. And then his eyes met mine. Just for a moment. But something in that look held me still. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was recognition. Like he knew what it felt like to carry 1,000 words you were too afraid to say. We talked that night. Not for long. Just enough to exchange a few words, a few smiles, a few memories from high school that neither of us remembered clearly, but pretended we did. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie scene. But it felt like something shifted in me. Like a window had been opened in a room I had forgotten how to breathe in. The days after that night were strange. I kept thinking about him. Not in the way you think about someone you're suddenly obsessed with, but in the way you think about a song you heard once and can't get out of your head. A song that sounds like home, even though you don't know the words yet. And then he messaged me. Just a casual, "Hey, it was good seeing you the other night. Want to grab coffee sometime?" And I said yes again. We met at this little place that didn't look like much from the outside. But inside, it smelled like fresh bread and second chances. We sat for hours. Talking. Laughing. Sharing silences that didn't feel awkward. He told me about his life. How it hadn't gone the way he planned. How he'd taken risks that didn't pay off. How he'd been hurt and healed and still believed there was more. I told him things I hadn't told anyone in years. About how I felt like I was drifting. How I woke up each morning with a weight I couldn't name. And he didn't try to fix me. He just listened. That coffee turned into more coffees. More conversations. More walks that lasted hours. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started waking up differently. I started looking forward to things. I started laughing, really laughing. That deep kind that surprises you, that shakes off dust from your bones. I started writing again. Reading books I had abandoned. Listening to music that made me feel alive. But it wasn't just about him. It wasn't about falling in love with someone else. It was about remembering who I was before life dulled my edges. It was about reconnecting with the girl who used to dream out loud, who used to dance in her bedroom at midnight, who used to believe she had something to offer this world. That invitation was the first thread. And as I pulled it, more threads came loose. Old friends I reconnected with. New experiences I was brave enough to try. A therapist I finally called. A trip I finally booked. And I know it sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like something out of a novel. But I promise you, it was all so painfully real. The fear, the hesitation, the moments where I questioned if I deserved any of it. There were days when I wanted to crawl back into my shell. Days when I felt like an imposter in my own joy. Healing isn't linear, and self-discovery isn't a straight path. But that one invitation was the first spark. The thing that reminded me that I was still here. That I still mattered. That life hadn't forgotten me. Even if I had forgotten myself. People talk a lot about big moments. Graduations. Promotions. Marriages. Births. But sometimes the biggest moments wear the most ordinary clothes. Sometimes they look like a simple text message on a Wednesday. Sometimes they come when you least expect them and offer you a hand you didn't even know you needed to hold. And no, the story didn't end in a fairy tale. We didn't ride off into the sunset, never to face hardship again. That's not life. We fought. We stumbled. We took time apart. But what mattered was the way he looked at me that night. What mattered was the way I said yes, even when fear begged me to say no. What mattered was how one invitation cracked something open in me that I thought was sealed shut. Because that invitation reminded me that change doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits, quietly, for you to be brave enough to open the door. Sometimes it just needs you to say yes. And in that yes, I found so many things I had forgotten. I found pieces of myself I hadn't seen in years. I found hope again. And not the kind of hope that glows from a distance, but the kind you carry in your pocket, close to your heart, reminding you that life is still full of surprises. That healing is possible. That love, in all its forms, can find you even in the quietest corners. I think about that invitation often. I think about how close I came to ignoring it. About what would have happened if I had stayed home that night. If I had let fear win. If I had chosen comfort over courage. It scares me, honestly, because it makes me realize how much of life is waiting just on the other side of our decisions. And maybe that's why I'm telling this story. Not because it's the most exciting story. Not because it has the neatest ending. But because it's true. Because it matters. Because sometimes we need to be reminded that one small act, one choice to show up, to be seen, to say yes, can shift the entire trajectory of our lives. So, if you're tired, if you're numb, if you're caught in the loop of days that all feel the same, listen. Listen closely. Because life might be whispering. It might be offering you something you can't yet understand. Don't ignore it. Don't silence the tug in your chest that says, go. Even if it's scary. Even if you feel broken. Especially then. Because I was all of those things. Scared. Lost. Exhausted. And yet, somehow, that one invitation cracked the sky open. And light poured through.